Oompa loompa bippity boo, I've got a little riddle for you. What do you need to make a classic flick? How do you ensure it really does click? Can the story and theme be sure to stick? So on any best films list, it's a sure pick. Well, I like the sounds of that. Okay, no more singing in this video. I promise. That was so bad.
The following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
This is when the pictures got bigger, and I want to take you back to 1971 for a profile of an Academy Award nominated film that doesn't show up on any Sight and Sound or AFI or IMDb best film lists. But it's something that I'll predict that most of the viewers of this channel have seen at least once, either on TV or perhaps even in the theaters. Or, if you're like me, a movie you've seen multiple times, likely too many times to count. It's a film that has spawned one well-funded remake, countless animated versions, and one upcoming holiday season 2023 prequel story.
Quiet up and listen down. Nope, scratch that, reverse it.
It's based on a classic children's novel from one of the best-selling children's book authors of all time. And in this episode of my YouTube channel, we're going to get lost in the beautiful words, costumes, sets, sounds, smells, colors, and general all-around kookiness of a movie that I'll argue belongs on many movie fans' best films of all time lists. I know it's on my list. Wait, I have it ranked ahead of The Wizard of Oz, The Graduate, The Godfather Parts 1 and 2, Shawshank Redemption, all the Indiana Jones films, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and even Vertigo? Am I crazy? Please, tell me more. I don't think any of you need to be told at this point the movie's name that I'm ranking near the top of my favorite films list, or even the plot of this all-time great. But, just in case there's still any confusion out there, this video will focus solely on the original 1971 Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This film, directed by Mel Stewart, with the musical score by the team of Leslie Bricusse and Anthony Newley, and starring the incomparable Gene Wilder. And I am going to provide you a golden ticket and try and offer you my top 5 reasons why this film has become so beloved in the last half century. As Mr. Wonka himself reminds us, we have so much time and so little to do. Wait a second. Strike that.
Reverse it. This way, please.
Before we get to the 5 reasons, let's start with a little background on the original story of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and its author, Roald Dahl. The writer Roald Dahl was born in Wales in 1916 as the only male child in a family that included 5 sisters, and he led a sheltered life as a child, growing up in England in a wealthy family that traced its origins to Norway.
I'm Friedrich. I'm 14. I'm impossible.
Dahl eventually served as a fighter pilot for the British Royal Air Force during the early years of World War II when he was in his young 20s. A plane accident in the Egyptian desert briefly delayed his war service, with subsequent blackouts ultimately ending his flying days and resulting in him moving to North America in 1942, where he eventually began serving as an attaché and alleged spy at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. While in Washington, he was encouraged to begin a writing career by famous British author C.S. Forester, who would see his 1935 novel, The African Queen, converted into the 4-time Academy Award-nominated 1951 film of the same name, directed and written by John Huston. Once he began writing, Dahl mostly wrote adult short stories, but he always showed a flair for penning riveting children's stories as well, authoring his first children's book, The Gremlins, in 1943, which was commissioned by none other than Walt Disney to be a full-length animated film that ultimately was never made. Dahl married the actress Patricia Neal in 1953. A marriage that would survive health scares, charges of infidelity, dual career success, and the tragic loss of a child, but would result a 3 decades-long union that saw the couple raise a large family together. Dahl would later state in interviews that he began writing more children's stories to have bedtime tales to read to his growing family.
Well, I think they take the books far more seriously than adults. If you read a novel, a goodish novel, you read it, you enjoy it, you put it down. And that's it. If a child picks up a book and likes it, that's not the end of it, you know. It's read at least 4, 5, and sometimes 15 times. And each time, it's got to stand up to that.
He wrote James and the Giant Peach in 1961, and then, in 1964, 2 years after the tragic death of his eldest daughter Olivia to measles and the year his 4th child Ophelia was born, Dahl wrote the classic story Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. In that eventful 1964 year that also saw Patricia Neal win her only Oscar for her performance in HUD alongside Paul Newman, the book version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was first released in the United States, with a UK release coming a few months later. Dahl based some of the story on experiences he had in boarding school as a child when the Cadbury Chocolate Company would send sample products to young students in return for their opinions on their chocolates. The book was an instant hit, not without some later controversies.
Candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker.
With one fan of the story happening to be the then 10-year-old daughter, Madeline, of the Hollywood film director Mel Stewart, who convinced her father of the book's potential as a movie. Stewart had a few romantic comedy films under his belt at that point, including If It's Tuesday, This Must Be Belgium. Stewart had also directed and co-produced the 1964 documentary 4 Days in November about the JFK assassination, which would earn an Academy Award nod for Best Documentary, although it would lose out to a Jacques Cousteau film, World Without Sun. Stewart had a long partnership with veteran Hollywood producer David L. Warper, who would become better known for his television work later in the 1970s with such masterpieces as Roots, The Thornbirds, and North and South, but he also did produce several theatrical films both before and after Willy Wonka. The duo focused on turning the beloved children's book into a feature film, a task which became easier when Wolper was able to convince the food distributor Quaker Oats to finance the movie for $3 million in return for licensing rights for a new candy bar to be titled The Wonka
Willy
Bar.
Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Gee, what a keen movie. I love that Willy Wonka.
Yeah, but how about that Chocolate Factory?
Oh, heavy. Sure wish I could make my own candy.
Yeah.
Captain Crunch speaking. Have I got a surprise for all my loyal crew? A special offer from the folks at Quaker. A miniature candy factory.
That particular candy bar never made it to the market in time for the film's initial theatrical release. Apparently, it melted too easily at room temperature. But the groundwork had been laid for the movie's greenlight, so filming began in Munich, Germany in 1970. Quaker Oats was also adamant that the movie title included the name of their new pending candy bar. So, the novel Charlie and the Chocolate Factory became Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It probably did not hurt that during the Vietnam War, the name Charlie was often associated with the Viet Cong. With a director, producing team, and budget set, the next task involved the creation of a screenplay and musical score, as well as crucial casting decisions for the film's lead and child actors. And that is where the Wonka magic began. Let's start with the writing. Reason number one that I'll argue that Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is the greatest children's film of all time. Dahl is certainly considered one of the greatest children's book authors in the last century. In fact, a 2023 BBC survey polled 177 book experts from 56 nations, and they placed 6 of his works in the top 100 children's books of all time, with the next most popular writer, Tove Jansson, showing up 5 times, and no other author showing up more than twice. As of this video, close to 100 adaptations have been made of Dahl's books or short stories, and this list is sure to grow as Netflix has licensed the creation of many more films from the Dahl family estate. But Dahl himself only worked on 4 screenplays, including 2 based on works by his good friend Ian Fleming. The 1968 musical fantasy film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
That's a curious name for a motor car.
and the 1967 version of You Only Live Twice, the 5th film in the James Bond library, both of which came out a few years after Fleming's 1964 death. The only other 2 Dahl screenplays were a 1971 thriller called The Night Digger, which starred his wife Patricia Neal.
What road will he travel next?
And then Willy Wonka. Despite some controversy about how much Dahl actually contributed to the film's final screenplay, it does remain the only adaptation of Dahl's works that attached his name to the film as a screenwriter. When production started on the film, Dahl still hadn't contributed a finished screenplay, so David Seitzer was brought in as an uncredited screenwriter to complete the film's manuscript. Seitzer may be a slightly unusual choice for a classic children's story. Some of his other completed screenplays include several horror films, including The Omen in 1976, as well as the adult dramas Table for Five, 6 Weeks, Punchline, and The Other Side of the Mountain. But there's no questioning the fact that Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory features sharp, biting satirical writing not often seen in a children's film.
Photostatic copy. I, the undersigned, shall forfeit all rights, privileges, and licenses herein and herein contained, etc., etc. Fax mentis incendium gloria culpum, etc., etc. Memo bis punitor delicatum. It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You stole fizzy lifting drinks. You bumped into the ceiling, which now has to be washed and sterilized, so you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
The film mixes in Monty Python and the Flying Circus type humor with richly drawn children's characters and memorable action scenes that capture the glory of a Dahl children's book better than any of the other many great movies made from his works. The team of David L. Wolper and Mel Stewart decided to convert Dahl's book into a musical, perhaps against the author's desires, and went after some giants in the music industry to provide the score for the film, including Richard Rodgers and Henry Mancini. Rodgers was the first ever entertainer to earn an EGOT with Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony wins, and known for such famous musicals as Oklahoma, Carousel, South Pacific, The King and I, and The Sound of Music. Mancini was a 4-time Academy Award winner who produced a series of musical hits on the big screen in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, including The Pink Panther, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Touch of Evil, Charade, and Days of Wine and Roses. Alas, both Mancini and Rodgers declined the invitation.
Lose. Good day, sir.
And so the team of Brickus and Newley were brought on board, and they produced a musical score that earned Wonka its only Academy Award nomination for Best Music, Scoring Adaptation, and Original Song Score.
Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, song score by Leslie Brickus and Anthony
A category it would eventually lose out to the musical legend John Williams, who earned the first of his 5 Oscar wins for the film Fiddler on the Roof. Brickus and Newley were songwriters and performers who were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1989, with Brickus composing 5 songs or scores that would earn Oscar nominations, including his only Academy Award win in 1983 for the music of Victor Victoria.
Henry Mancini and Leslie Bricos for Victor Victoria.
While Newley would act and sing in many films in his career, including Dr. Dolittle. There are 7 songs in Wonka. Well, perhaps 8 if you count Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro in the musical Lock that allows the contest winners to enter the Chocolate Factory. Although Mrs. Beauregard mistakenly says it's Rachmaninoff. And Newley and Brickus absolutely make the most of that limited musical contribution time. The film contains several masterpieces. I've Got a Golden Ticket, the various Oompa Loompa songs, which also appear in the original book, so technically Dahl did help compose those songs. I Want It Now, Cheer Up Charlie. That one I usually fast forward through though when watching the film.
Cheer up, Charlie, give me a smile.
And 2 that have entered into the echelon of musical film history, The Candyman and Pure Imagination. Let's start with The Candyman. It's given an optimal spot in the movie, as the first song appearing shortly after the opening credits end, and we see the mysterious chocolate factory for the first time.
He mixes it with lava, makes the world taste good.
And the song became the biggest hit from the film, and of performer Sammy Davis Jr.'s career.
He mixes it with love, it makes the world taste good.
In the film, it's sung by Bill the Candyman, played by British actor Aubrey Woods, but Newley recorded his own version of the song shortly after the film's theatrical release, and then allowed his good friend Sammy Davis Jr. to put it on an album, where it skyrocketed up the charts to hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in June 1972. A spot it remained for 3 weeks before later being recognized as the 5th most popular song of the year, just below American Pie. A personal trivia note I can add to this song is that the background vocals for Davis's hit were performed by the Mike Curb congregation. Curb is a singer and music composer who later became the lieutenant governor in California.
Mike Curb made a lot of money on films like these aimed at teenagers, but denies his responsibility. Isn't it time for Mike Curb to stop hiding the truth? You be the judge.
And he attended my alma mater, Cal State Northridge University. In fact, the film school at CSUN where I recently graduated is named for Curb. Although I've never found a scrumdiddlyumptious bar for sale at the CSUN campus, they do love Mike Curb. Although The Candyman became the biggest musical breakthrough hit out of the film, you could argue that the song that has had the greater impact over time has been Pure Imagination, sung by Gene Wilder in the middle of the film after he introduces his factory to the contest winners.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
It's been covered by such diverse performers as
Come with me, and you'll be
In a world of
Take a look, and you'll see
into your imagination.
and an instrumental version of the song even appears in the 2017 Marvel Studios film Thor Ragnarok. Sure, the song is corny at times, but what children's movie songs aren't sugary? At least this one is sung by a true candy maker, so if he wants to tell us that
No life I know to compare with pure imagination. Living there you'll be free if you truly wish to be.
who are we to argue?
Here it is, golden ticket number 3, and it's all mine.
Tell us how it happened, Violet.
With a script, filming locations, and music being put together for the film, the next task to be handled by the film's producers was casting. With no more important role necessary to be cast than Willy Wonka himself, the casting directors had a tall order. Although Dahl wanted British comedian Spike Milligan for the lead role, many other British and American actors and entertainers were considered, including all 6 members of Monty Python.
Monty Python, the Flying Circus.
The Monty Python TV show had just begun its second season on British television, so none of the 6 comedians were yet considered big enough names for the role. Other names for Wonka surfaced. Peter Sellers allegedly begged Dahl to be considered for the role, and a few more actors were considered and rejected, including Fred Astaire, who perhaps was a bit old for the role at age 72, and Joel Grey, who would rebound fairly strongly from losing his chance at playing Willy Wonka to an Academy Award-winning role in Cabaret a year later. The casting call for the role of Wonka was held at the Plaza Hotel in New York City.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
Down the hall and to the left.
Thanks.
Oops, wrong children's movie. After a week's worth of actors came and went from the Plaza casting call, in walked an actor with just 4 movie credits to his name at the time, Gene Wilder. He had more than carried his own, sharing the screen with Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway in his 1967 film debut in Bonnie and Clyde. But he had then followed up that smaller role with a Best Supporting Actor nomination for his role as Leopold Leo Bloom in Mel Brooks' The Producers later that year. 3 years later, Wilder landed his first starring roles in a pair of comedies that only had minor success at the box office. The 1970 film Start the Revolution Without Me and Quackster Fortune Has a Cousin in the Bronx. Unsurprisingly, though, he dazzled both Stewart and Wolper in his audition. Stewart later wrote about Wilder's audition, his inflection was perfect. He had the sardonic, demonic edge that we were looking for. In a 2002 interview with CNN's Larry King, Wilder explained how he ultimately accepted the role.
And Mel Stewart, the director, came to my home and he said, "You want to do it?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you, I'd like to do it if I can come out and I'm using a cane. Oh my God, Willy Wonka is crippled. And my cane gets stuck in a brick and I fall over on my face and do a forward somersault and jump up and they all start to applaud." He said, "Are you saying you won't do the film if you can't do that?" I said, "That's what I'm saying." "Okay, we'll do it."
Wilder then makes one of the most memorable entrances in film history. And the rest, as they say, is history. Wilder would not only earn an Oscar nomination for the Wonka role, but a Golden Globe nomination for the 1971 film, and then later earned a second Oscar nomination for co-writing the screenplay for Young Frankenstein.
It's pronounced Frankenstein.
Still, there are other acting roles in Willy Wonka that should be recognized. Jack Albertson as Grandpa Joe, and Julie Dawn Cole as one of the Golden Ticket winners, Veruca Salt. They both get my votes. Still, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is beloved simply because of Wilder's iconic role. And let's settle the debate now, in advance of any internet chatter that might show up after the release of the 2023 prequel Wonka, in terms of who played Wonka better, Gene Wilder, Johnny Depp, or now Timothée Chalamet. Who is the best Willy Wonka?
The suspense is terrible. I hope it'll last.
No suspense, Mr. Wilder was the best. With a great cast, script, and musical score in place, Wonka still wouldn't have become the classic beloved children's film without some original directorial moments from Stewart. In fact, I'll argue that the film has enough aspects of new realism and experimental filmmaking that the movie could be firmly placed into the era of cinema in the early 1970s that many fans came to call the American New Wave.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
You talking to me?
Just compare it to some of the other children's non-animated films that also came out in that era. Robert Stevenson's Bedknobs and Broomsticks, The Love Bug, or The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. Yet the early 1970s were certainly a golden era for Hollywood filmmaking, and some of the new approaches to grittier, more daring storytelling can also be seen in Willy Wonka.
I can take a joke, but has it gone too far?
You want threats from film characters that leave you trembling in your theater seats? Certainly, you would include Vito Corleone's Offer You Can't Refuse in that category. But for a 12-year-old watching a 1971-72 movie, the implied threats from a mysterious Mr. Slugworth when he stops Charlie running home in that alley with the 5th golden ticket, it's probably equally as scary.
So all I want you to do is to get hold of just one everlasting gobstopper and bring it to me so that I can find the secret formula.
Speaking of which, there were certainly some great villains in 1970s movies. Laurence Olivier's sadistic Dr. Christian Gell treating Dustin Hoffman in The Marathon Man probably left a whole generation with a morbid fear of going to the dentist. But again, was he as terrifying as Slugworth encountering Violet Beauregard, Veruca Salt, or Mike TV? I mean, just look at that scar. Even Tony Montana would be impressed.
Say hello to my little friend!
But Willy Wonka is a children's film, and with the exception of one famous scene, more on that later, most of Mel Stuart's direction centered around the joys, mystery, and beauty of the Wonka factory. Much of the Wonka factory shooting was done at Bavaria Studios in Munich, with other exterior shots also done throughout Germany. Stewart insisted on unusual-looking machines and sets, and famously did not allow his child actors to see the interiors of the chocolate factory set until filming commenced. The main factory visuals first seen when Wilder's Willy Wonka sings Pure Imagination included about a third of the set being edible, with one important exception being the flower cup, which was actually made of wax, in which the actor would spit out after completing each take. The result is a 100-minute film that rarely bores its child audiences, as every element of the narrative delivers in its setup. Much like the rewards of eating a Wonka gobstopper, every moment in the journey in the chocolate factory produces surprise after surprise as you get closer to the end. And for that, we must credit the film's director, Mel Stuart. Reason number 5. I promised to talk a little more about one important scene in Willy Wonka, and we can't avoid the elephant in the screening room any longer.
Maintenant, nous allons faire un petit voyage par bateau.
What's he talking about?
Voulez-vous entrer le Wonkatania?
What the heck was happening in the boat scene? I mean, is there any children's film moment in history that is more terrifying or kookier? Even Stephen King couldn't compose horror dialogue that can compete with Wonka's rhyming warning seen here.
Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is a hurricane a-blowing? Not a speck of light is showing, so the danger must be growing. Are the fires of hell a-glowing? Is the grisly reaper mowing? Yes! The danger must be growing, for the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing!
Oh, make him stop, Daddy! Wonka, this has gone far enough! Quite right, sir. Stop the boat!
The lines are intense enough for a children's film. But as the audience sees worms, snakes, a decapitated chicken, and other images of satanic corruption flashed on the tunnel's walls as the boat continues down a dark tunnel towards an unknown destination, the audience must question, what exactly are we watching? I wish I knew. As I said, I've seen this movie more times than I can remember, and watched all of the special features and read as much about it as I can, and I have no idea the purpose of this scene. Were the filmmakers reverting to their psychedelic drugs they used to take in the late 1960s? Perhaps. Was it another test for the remaining children touring the factory? Remember, it's now 4 kids as Augustus Gloop has been sucked up the chocolate river, and it really seems that only Charlie and Grandpa Joe are enjoying the boat ride. The boat ride scene, complete with Wonka's disturbing rhymes, is in the original book, but somehow it's a lot less intense in print. This movie scene may still be leading to nightmares for some adults a half-century later. It's kooky movie making that perhaps can be labeled as the most lasting memory from the entire film. Wonka's Rosebud moment from Citizen Kane, Star Wars' I Am Your Father, or E.T.'s flying bike scene. It's just a lot scarier for kids, and the Chocolate River scene is that moment. There are certainly other impressions or even questions one could pose about the 1971 Wonka movie. One part of the film that has always bugged me personally is how society treats Charlie Bucket. Why is Bill the Candyman handing out free treats to the town's spoiled kids left and right in the film's opening scene, but requiring an obviously impoverished Charlie to pay for his chocolate bars fully and promptly a few days later? I love Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and it's a film that I've seen probably 25 times, and one that I'll continue to watch until the day I'm as old as Grandpa Joe. I also have intensely positive memories of watching this movie with my dad and brother at a retrospective screening at my local Alamo Drafthouse. We went to the screening, which had Paris Tepin and Julie Dawn Cole, Mike TV, and Veruca Salt in attendance. We got all sorts of goodies and candy while we watched the movie, and then we got to ask the actors questions about their 1971 filming experience. After that, they signed our posters and we took pictures. It was just an amazing experience and indicative of the staying power that Willy Wonka has even 50 years later. And there are so many more experiences like that. If you watched Willy Wonka in theaters or in any other unique circumstance, let me know your history with this classic movie. But until the next time, I'll see you at the Chocolate Factory.